Welcome to the International Classroom Podcast, where we explore the world of education through a global lens. As a teacher, you know that every student has unique needs, experiences, and perspectives, and we believe that a global perspective is key to creating an inclusive and effective classroom. In each episode, we bring you insights and discussions from experts and educators around the world, sharing their experiences, challenges, and solutions in the classroom. Whether you're a student, a teacher, or anyone interested in education, we invite you to join us on this learning journey. Now, before we get into today's episode, make sure to follow us on your favorite streaming sites to stay up to date on our latest episodes. If you're watching this on Deep Teaching on YouTube and you've yet to, please subscribe. We've been fortunate enough to have some fantastic guests on, so please do share this with your colleagues and friends and let us know who you'd like us to speak with next. Julie, thank you ever so much for joining us on the International Classroom Podcast today. As I start every podcast and just to feed into the listeners and the people watching about yourself, who are you and what do you do?
Thank you. And before I answer that question, I want to just say thank you for having me. It's really a lovely moment to talk to another educator. You provide content for other educators, and I tend to know from my work with them that educators tend to be learners. They just love to consume knowledge. And so your platform provides that for them. And so thank you for having me. And actually, the question that you're asking is kind of, I was going to say pertinent, because it's a question I ask when I do coaching a lot, because coaching is very much about identity. So who are you is a really important question, but I'm going to answer it in the way that you intended, which is I'm Julie Keys, and I am the educational coach, and I am the lead coach at the Educational Coach.
So what's your background with this then? How did you find yourself in, first of all, the world of coaching, but secondly, in educational coaching?
So my background is that I'm a teacher by profession and vocation. I have been for my whole career. And so in a way, this is only a very recent endeavor within the since COVID. So very recent in terms of stepping out of the classroom, but still feeling very much connected to schools. So my educational journey is that I'm a teacher. I worked in lots of different types of schools, UK, international, secondary, independent, state, you name it. We've been there. I say we because my husband is also a teacher. So some of that was a sort of joint journey with him, particularly the international teaching. My journey to coaching was, I decided to step away from the classroom for a little bit, just not because I was completely overwhelmed or burnt out or disgruntled or, disillusioned or anything like that. Just circumstance. And my husband is a teacher as well, so I kind of pushed him back into the classroom, and I kind of kept my hand in because I really enjoy working in education. So I started doing some consultancy jobs. And that was very varied. I really enjoyed the variety of it and everything I learned from each one of those experiences. And they ranged from looking at classroom environments to digital strategy. And every single one of those were, for me, was like a learning opportunity. I got to go into so many schools and it was like, wow, I get to see all of these different environments. I'm just kind of soaking it up like a sponge. And then through that, I built up quite a good amount of work. So much so that, looking back on this wasn't the best decision. I confidently said to my husband he could quit his job. So I was in that amount of confidence that the amount of work I had coming in was going to be able to sustain both of us and our family. So he quit his job. And then COVID happened. So it was really poor timing, and I can speak with levity and kind of laugh about it now. It was potentially one of the worst times in my life, where I had gone from feeling as though I could provide for my family, and within overnight having zero income coming in, zero. So it was incredibly challenging. But through that, I had the privilege of a couple of schools keeping a relationship with me and allowing me to help them with their transition to online learning. And I promise I'm getting to coaching. Through that, I was working with different levels. I was working with whole school doing kind of training. I was working with senior leadership in kind of that crisis management time that we all went through. And I was also offering some one-to-ones for people. They were under the guise of kind of tech upskilling. You know, how do I use Microsoft Teams? How do I use Google Classroom? It was all, sort of in the fire, I would say. But it was also a moment where people were incredibly stressed. And they felt really what's the word? Just shifted by the whole world. And they needed to have those moments to talk to people. So even though we were talking about tech, a lot of those one-to-one sessions ended up being sessions where they were offloading. And I thought to myself, I really like these one-to-one sessions. I really feel as though I'm coming away from them having left people in a better place than I found them, and really taking care of teachers' personal development and personal growth as well as their professional development, which was obviously something that I was always interested in. And I thought to myself, this might be coaching, but I wasn't sure because I had never done that officially. And I think that was something that dawned on me that, you know, in education, we have conversations every day, some of them developmental, some of them with our colleagues. And it can feel as though you're having a coaching conversation. But for me to feel confident that I felt like I needed to go and make sure I was trained. So I decided to do that. I actually trained with a Dubai-based company online. And I chose them because they were not based in education. I wanted to train with people who were in the corporate space, just to challenge myself a little bit, because I didn't want to be just in education. I wanted to kind of get a bit of a broader sense. And I did that course, and I thought, this is the thing that education needs right now. So I then offered it separately. So before I was the educational consultant, and now I'm the educational coach, and we just predominantly offer coaching. We still do a bit of consultancy. But.
It's an absolutely fantastic journey you've taken us on there. So thank you for sharing that. It's okay to name drop here, by the way, because the Dubai-based company that you are going to mention, or I might mention for you, and you can nod or agree with me, it doesn't happen to be kind of partly owned by an Australian and partly owned by a English hockey ex-teacher, does it?
It does, yeah.
So funnily enough, Peter and Mick, who own said company, I also did my coaching course through them as well. So it shows what a small world this place is, doesn't it? Who are fantastic. So the irony there is you went to do a coaching course to move away from education and probably got coached by someone who's an ex-educator.
Yeah, that's true. Both of them are ex-educators, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
But then, you know, that also is testament to the quality of that course. I've been on lots of courses that are not, that are outside of education, and something that teachers do very well and know very well is how to plan sequences of learning and how to make it engaging. And so that showed in the quality of that course, which was that it wasn't just great content. It was presented in a way that was engaging, that developed me. And so, yeah, that's testament to Peter, really, because not that Mick isn't great, but Mick wasn't the facilitator on that course, and Pete was fantastic. Yeah.
I always want to call them Two Unlimited as the band from the, late 90s? But it's not, that's not their name, by the way, but it sounds, yeah. So you've done that, you've done the course, you're now, so obviously COVID's gone. And I suppose most people listening want to know that, you know, how did you come out the other side of that? Is your husband back in working? How are things going?
Yeah, thank you. It is, you know, I kind of grapple with how candid to be about this, because it is a really important journey. I would consider our company to be a really successful company now, and I'm incredibly proud not only of the growth of our company, but also how the impact that we have in schools. And that's, the second part is not an afterthought, that's the main bit. But I think that sometimes, and we spoke before we started recording about how the curation of what you look like online gives a certain impression. And certainly, with our young people, we're very aware of that and we educate them on, what you see online isn't real life, but we kind of forget about that in our own adult life. So I know that the content that I put out via Instagram or LinkedIn may give a certain impression that, everything's really rosy. And it is, like, I'm so positive at the moment, but it certainly wasn't. And so from that very, very low point, and I cannot overemphasize how low that point was for me, and our family, I suppose, I'm not speaking out of turn when I kind of include my husband in that. It's hard graft. Basically, it's just really hard graft, and really passionately believing in the impact of what I was doing. And I suppose in a way, it was a huge blessing, because it really made me laser focused on what I really wanted to focus on, and it made me super passionate about it. And I think that if you spoke to anybody who I'm put in front of in terms of schools and teachers, they would come away saying she's really passionate about what she does. And that's a win for me. So in terms of my own kind of mental health and my positivity around the future, it's really strong. My husband he works part-time now as a teacher. And I think I inspired him. I can say it because he's not here to say that I didn't. I think I inspired him, and he set up his own business. So for the other 2.5 days a week, he runs a surf brand. And again, we live in Cornwall, so it's very much homegrown kind of Cornish surf brand that he runs. And it's pretty successful. So yeah, no, it's good.
That's
it's good.
That is fantastic to hear. Fantastic to hear. And congratulations to you both on your success. And I think that emphasizes then, and leads nicely into this in terms of the importance or significance of coaching in education. But from your opinion, why do you think that's important for schools? Why do you think so many schools are now taking this up?
I think it's I'm going to say things and you're going to say that's a Mickism, or okay. That's what Pete would say. But we've had the same training, and so you'll know that the things that I'm saying are coming from a place of understanding and learning from that course, but also from my learning from being in schools currently. COVID taught us lots of things. It really brought into sharp focus the need to focus on well-being. It also brought into sharp focus the need to focus on teacher development and teacher retention. And it also really made a point around culture, school culture. What is it? Do we live our values, or do we just put it on our prospectus? Do we really believe this about our teachers? Do we really want to develop them, or do we just do an appraisal system and say they're either a good teacher or they're not? So there was a kind of shift that I felt, which was, we need to do something differently here. And so in terms of coaching in schools, although yes, it's quite new, that it's so surprising to me that it's new, given that we are relationship-based organizations, and foundation stone of that is good communication. And so for me, when we go into schools, it's about only one thing, and it's very simple, which is we want to make every conversation a high quality conversation. And I ask people, what would be the impact if every conversation you had in school, whether it was with a child, your colleague, a parent, was a high quality conversation? What would be the cumulative impact of that in the culture in your school? So I think that there's lots of layers. Yes, well-being, without it being tokenistic. This is about really having conversations that are moving from judgmental to developmental, and looking at a teacher as a whole teacher, as a person. How do I develop that person professionally, and how do I grow them personally? And I feel like that becomes more part of what the culture of a school is about. And the ones that do it well, do it really, really well, and see that in the development of their staff and the retention of their staff and the staff that are attracted to work in that type of school.
I'm excited to share some big news from Deep Professional. We've launched our first course on Teachable, called Getting Started with ChatGPT for Educators. Now, it's been written by teachers for teachers, and it's all about how you can incorporate ChatGPT into your day-to-day teaching. So why should you check this out? Well, this course is a living and growing resource. As we discover more ways to use ChatGPT in the classroom, we'll keep adding new lessons. And we believe this could be a game changer for educators around the globe who want to stay at the forefront of educational technology. And the best part, we're offering a special launch discount. Visit coursesdeepprofessional.com and you'll get 20% off the course price until Monday, July the 3rd. But that's not all. To celebrate the end of our first season, we're giving 3 lucky listeners a chance to win this course for free. Stay tuned to our next episode for more exciting details on this exciting opportunity. And don't miss out. Head over to courses@deepprofessional.com and start exploring with Deep Professional today. So what does that look like from your side? Because like you say, you get certain degrees of it where you get some schools that do it exceptionally well, some schools that might just be on that journey toward it, and some schools that pay lip service to it, but actually don't do anything. And I've experienced it where people go, right, let's go and have some coaching conversations. And you'll hear this phrase. And I think sometimes that's why you might get this certain view or opinion from educators or staff about what is coaching or the uncertainty, or is it just another buzzword in it? But what is it, those schools that do it well, what is so unique about them? What is it they actually do? And what does that look like?
It's so different to each context, but if I can draw out broad themes, let's take a one-to-one coaching session, whether it's being run by me and internally to that school or between 2 educators in that school. First of all, there are conditions that have to be there. To be able to have a productive conversation, it needs to be a psychologically safe space. It needs to be a space where there's a high level of trust. It needs to be a space where you're allowing vulnerability. If you have those things happening in every conversation you're having, then the way that shifts things, it's like a real seismic shift. People come to conversations expecting it to be conducted in that way. They want to be developed. They're expecting a challenging question. They're expecting to be listened to and heard really well, and they feel invested in, and they feel as though they're important, and they feel as though they're valued, and they're feeling as though they're being developed. So in that individual conversation, that's what that looks like. In terms of embedding it across the school, I'm always blown away about how the different schools take what we've taught them and then kind of apply it within their own context. So to talk about Dubai, I work with 2 schools in Dubai and 1 in Abu Dhabi. But the 2 that I'm working in Dubai are just about to enter into their sort of second year-ish, maybe just a bit more. And so I'm able to see that embedment really happening. And they ran with it. They really ran with it. And so it has affected everything in that school. They went back and had a look at their values. They went back and had a look at how they conduct appraisals and performance management, how they do lesson feedback, how they have conversations between colleagues, how they run meetings, how they have teacher-parent meetings, how they talk to the students. Their whole appraisal system was the first thing they looked at, and they completely revamped it. They removed all judgments in terms of lesson observations. They introduced professional growth conversations with someone who wasn't their line manager, as well as having conversations with people who were their line manager to be able to continue that kind of mentoring role. They adopted an approach where they were handing over control of the professional development entirely to the members of staff rather than directing it themselves. And so the effect of that has just been, I think, transformative in terms of the way that people feel about coming to school, how engaged they are with their work, how much they feel valued, how they grow, the conversations that happen. It's just, I honestly, it's so difficult to say, but when I go to that school, I feel it. And it must be evident because in their last KHDA report, it was referenced, specifically the coaching approach that they take. So I think that for me, if someone can notice that in a couple of days, who's a stranger to that school, that says there's something special that's going on here.
Yeah, because that's always one of the things is about what's the impact? How do you measure the impact of that? And if it's that noticeable in terms of, how they speak to one another. We talk about whether things are transformative or transactional, don't we? And seeing those transformations in values, in relationships, that's the big thing. And then what we want to see from that is, right, how does that impact the kids? What's the impact of that? And I think sometimes we as teachers, and this is my opinion, is we focus on the students first and forget about the adults, the teachers that are in that place. And not to say that's wrong, but I would say if you focus on the teachers as much as the students and you look after them, that trickle down effect is infectious. What you're then going to pass on to them. It's like, who would you rather have teaching your kids? Someone who is happy, motivated, inspired, valued, energized, versus some of the things we're currently seeing in the world, aren't we? And that kind of leads us into then the challenges, because that's what you've described there is the end result. It sounds like a real success story, but there's got to be some challenges that come along the way with this.
Yeah. Well, what in terms of trying to embed coaching, or just challenges in teaching?
If we were doing challenges in teaching, we'd be here for a long time. What challenges do you find in terms of you going into a school? Let's say you're in a new school, whether it's international, as you've said, and that's why we're here for the international classroom. Or can make those comparisons between what you see between the UK and us here, and hopefully into other countries in the future for you. But you're going into this new school. What are some of the challenges you face along this journey, whether it's from teachers or leadership groups or groups of individuals? What are some of the challenges you faced, and how do you work on overcoming them?
Well, the first thing is that the first stage in engagement with us, I call it the hook phase, which means you should be excited, interested. You should be hearing conversations in the school that allude to the fact that coaching is something that you might want to be looking at. So in a way, it's the first hurdle to get over. And I very rarely get people knocking on my door wanting one thing and getting something else, because they're coming from a point where they've already kind of figured it out in their head that this is the thing they want to do. And if they're not sure, I do tell them to not engage with us, because I want to be working with people who I know are wanting the same thing that I'm going to be able to offer them. So I do say to them, if this is not for you right now, if you've got lots of other stuff going on, if you're not really sure, let's not do it, because let's not waste my time and your time. So I'm very lucky in the respect that the schools that kind of come on board with us are very much already in that space. So that's the first hurdle overcome. But that's not to say that everybody within the organization, and that might be the leadership team who are like, yay, let's do this. And then there might be other people in the organization who are a little bit, arms folded at the back of the room, kind of, right, let's see what she has to say about this then. And I think that a lot of the time, I would say, without over stating this, and I think it's true in some cases, comes from what I would call organizational trauma. They've been in organizations where they are so used to being heavily scrutinized, judged, not developed, not looked after, that anything like this comes with an air of suspicion. Is this just a way of actually just keeping tabs on us? Are we actually just going to have these lesson feedback conversations and they're not confidential, and you're going to go running to whoever my direct report is and say, Julie's come and told me that she doesn't really know anything about differentiation. It feels as though it's kind of high stakes for some people. And a lot of the time people have also wrongly been told that coaching has been part of a support plan. And as we know, in terms of that terminology, a support plan feels like a negative thing. I'm not saying that in every case it is, but a lot of the time it is a way that somebody is being managed out of their job. And so sometimes they've experienced coaching, and I'm doing air quotes for our listeners, coaching, because and it hasn't really been coaching. It's been a way to tell them what to do, tell them how to improve, all the things they're doing wrong. And so they feel nervous about engaging in a process where they're going to have to be very vulnerable. So that's definitely one of the challenges, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting, that facet, in terms of, because if I was to ask you then, from your professional opinion, what is coaching?
What is coaching? Okay, so I normally have a very simple diagram that illustrates this, but for our listeners, you're just going to have to imagine this in your head. I talk about a suite of services that feel really similar to coaching but have distinctions, so that we'll all be familiar with. So anything from therapy and counselling down one end, coaching in the middle, mentoring, and then maybe consultancy as other facets of a similar type of feeling. And consultancy and mentoring are very much advice giving services. And because you and I have done the same course, we know that pretty much anything below that line, so coaching and therapy and counselling, don't fall into that. So therapy and counselling are therapeutic interventions where we're helping somebody, usually past focused, present and past focused, helping them to work through some kind of level of trauma. And therapists and counsellors are trained to be able to deal with those complex layers of trauma. Because as you know, from a coaching session and a counselling session, you never know where that's going to go from the moment it starts. You start it and 40 minutes later you're in a totally different place that you didn't really think that you were going to be at. And the reason for that is because it is led by the person who comes to that session, not led by the therapist, not led by the coach. So it's not like you sign up for therapy and someone says, right, come on in, let's talk about your father. No, that you've gone there with a thought in mind about what you'd like to speak about. In the same way, for coaching, it's led by the person who's come to engage in coaching, and so therefore, it's very much the onus is on them to bring the content, and the onus is on the coach to provide the questioning and the listening. Mentoring and coaching tend to be grouped together quite a lot, and I see lots of courses where it's like mentoring, coaching, and while I see a huge value in mentoring, I'm not doing down that. There is a really strong distinction, and I think that sometimes that grey area is difficult for people to understand. Is this mentoring or is this coaching? Should I be mentoring now or should I be coaching now? The fact is there are lots of very similar techniques, but the clear distinction is that mentoring typically should be, the idea is that I've walked your path before, so I'm able to give you advice and guidance and support because I've been where you've been. So I can help you. And the same with consultancy, but usually that's to do with a specific area of expertise, like I'm coming in and helping you with the early years, for example, because that's my area of expertise. Whereas coaching is very much more, let's talk about what you would like to develop. And I'm going to sit, I'm going to listen, actively listen, and I'm going to have well-constructed questions that's going to challenge your thinking, push your thinking, change your perspective, make you reflect. So that would be the distinction. I don't know if I explained that right or not.
No, I think you have, and it leads us kind of along that path. And now, where teachers, anyone else listening, by the way, who gets confused by this, is because if I throw another phrase into it, I could say instructional coaching, and it seems that has a benefit, but it's like another buzzword that leaders throw out without really understanding what it is and how is that different from normal coaching or even mentoring, and they just kind of seem to assimilate it together. So it's great to be able to try and get a discrepancy and segregate what they are, because even coaching and instructional coaching are they have nuances, two very separate things, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I think that is really important to separate out. And I think as we move through our work with schools, we sort of train them in pure coaching in the way that we were. And we really hone that skill around really being able to listen, really being able to construct those right questions, and being able, with the knowledge that you could do that in any setting. So you could coach anybody in that kind of pure coaching mode. But also it's important to understand that there are times where situational coaching is really important. The way in which you're going to do coaching as a head of department, deputy head, or a teaching assistant is all going to be very different. So let's talk about a way in which you're going to embed or implement coaching in your role. And so that's another facet, situational coaching and instructional coaching and all of those kind of different things. But yeah, you're right. There's so many different facets.
No, that's grand. Well, I think it's really interesting now to start exploring sort of your work and the type of things you do, so people can start to get a picture of what it's like and why it's important. So let's set aside with this scenario. You're coming in, let's say you come into my school. We're going to work with middle leaders. So there's a group of 10 of us. Okay. So you've hooked us in, like you said at the start, you've got us hooked in, and you're going to start developing us as coaches. It's like, what would a sort of a typical, let's say, session from the educational coach, what would that look like? What would that sound like or look like, whichever one we go with?
Okay, so there's a couple of really strong threads that make up our coaching, I suppose, which is that number one, we are trying to embed a coaching culture. So we very much avoid the idea that we could just coach the head, for example, charge a lot of money, coach the head, we'll navel gaze in the office for a while. No impact will happen in the school because one person can't do it. It might be very beneficial to that one person, but one person can't make all of the change. So the scenario you described is perfect, where we have a number of people who are involved. Typically, we would say we'd like it to go vertically. We'd like to have all layers rather than horizontally, because as I described before, the way in which people in different layers of the school or different stages or ages in their career are going to embed coaching in a different way. And we also like to include support staff, administrative staff, because this is cultural change. So it has to be part of everything that you're doing. And we, our signature program, I mentioned the phrase earlier, which was every conversation. Our signature program is called Every Conversation because that is our aim, that we try and make an impact on every conversation that you have. In fact, on our business cards, it says on the back, this is a conversation that will change all other conversations. So we're really hoping that we're able to give people the tools so that they can start having those really impactful conversations. So it's broken into 3 parts. It lasts a year, and we go through 3 stages. The first being experiencing coaching. The second being learning coaching, so coach training. And then the third being practice, practicing coaching. And if you've pieced together, if you've been listening carefully enough, listeners, you will have pieced together the different component parts, and you'll realize that it spells out the acronym HELP. So hook, experience, learn, and practice. So the experience part, we believe to be a good coach, you need to have been coached, and you need to have been coached by somebody who knows what they're doing. Because all too often I see people bringing in people, they do like a course, and then they're like, right, off you go coach. And then it's novice coaching novice, and you don't really know whether you're getting it right. So experiencing coaching is a really important part of it, not least because it's fantastic professional development. Like, when do you have a chance to have a personally assigned coach who's external from your organization, who's going to spend sessions with you, a good chunk of time with you, just talking about you, personally and professionally. So that's first off. The second reason we do it is because it's really good to have that good coaching role modeled, as I've just said. So you get to see what good looks like. And then the third reason is so that you start to develop empathy for your coachee, because at some point they will become the coach and they will have to coach other people. So understanding that, being in a place where you are being coached or engaging in a coaching conversation can be vulnerable, can feel quite cathartic, can feel quite therapeutic in nature. And you as the coach need to create that environment where you can have that high level of trust. So that's experience, then coach training. So we give them the tools and allow them to explore what it looks like to now be the coach. And then practice. Practice is everything. Practice is everything. I can't overstate it enough. On my calendar is chock full of coaching sessions. Every week I'm coaching day in, day out, and every single one of those coaching sessions I learn something from. So practicing is the way that you're going to get better at anything. So we help and facilitate practice for them, with them.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough. I've been talking a lot about that recently, about practice and deliberate practice and skills. It's a big mantra of mine in education and sports, all sorts of things. And it's one thing that teachers, education, and anyone works in just does not get enough of. So I'm really glad that you've emphasized that point as well, because the only way to get better, and from experience as well in coaching, is practice, practice, practice. That's why you have to do 30 hours or 75 hours, isn't it, to actually get those accreditations and be up at the level you're at, plus more probably. So from your opinion then, what makes a good coach?
My husband asked me not that long ago, do you think everybody can be a coach? Can everybody have the skills to be a coach? And I did have to ponder that for a while, and I'm not sure I know the answer, completely yet. But I find coaching to be an incredibly mindful practice. I have to be, when I'm doing my coaching sessions, I have to be entirely present. My brain doesn't think of anything else, because all I'm focusing on is that other person, the words they're saying, the intonation they use, when their voice becomes excited, when they withdraw, when they repeat words, the things they don't say. And so the active listening part is, I always say, you should feel exhausted by the end of it. If you're doing it right, you should feel exhausted, because you are concentrating so much on listening. And I think that so the great basis for somebody being a good coach is someone who is a good listener. Now, I caveat that with lots of people think they're good listeners until you really practice listening. Not hearing, listening, not hearing to respond, listening just to listen to the words that people are saying, because you learn so much just by listening to what people are giving you freely. So that's the first part. And of course, the other side of the equation in coaching is being able to construct good questions. And again, that is a real skill. And again, it takes a lot of practice. And I'm constantly, this is very frustrating. I do have to be this insufferable person where I have to be like this in my personal life and in my professional life. And my goodness, aren't there times where people are saying, please don't coach me.
My wife hates it.
I don't want you to coach me. Yeah, my husband hates it too. Don't worry, they can create their own support network, like spouses of coaches.
But it's true. You do get it. You have to switch it on. You have to have like those hats that you wear. It's like, where am I going to wear that coaching hat? My leadership hat, or my dad hat, and you've probably got mum hat, parent hat, whatever it may be. And you've got to be able to switch it on and off, because what you've described for me are the two greatest strengths and the two greatest weaknesses of teachers. Generally, and it's a skill, most teachers, and why I think they can make good coaches is because they're very good at creating questions, verbalizing questions, in terms of digging that little bit deeper. What we see in classrooms, dig a bit deeper, ask those questions, go for the, what would happen if, and how are we going to, those things. That's the strength. The weakest part of the teacher, and this is, I kind of think all teachers agree on, is that they all love the sound of their own voice. And so we as teachers, and I've learned this, I'm now, I try and sit and listen and be in that active state. But teachers like to talk, and you've probably found the advice monster, that teachers like to then give advice and talk it through, don't they?
Absolutely, and that quietening down your brain, listening to what they're saying. And then the power of creating a really good question is not just, what am I going to fill the silence with now? And by the way, the silence part is really important as well. Giving people space and time to process, really important. But creating a question that is neutral, that is truly open, that creates focus for somebody, that allows them to think about action. That is a real skill. And yes, you can. And one of the most requested things I have when we finish our coach training is, could I have like a list of questions I can ask? And there's part of me that understands that, you're trying to do quite a lot when you're first starting to do coaching. You're listening, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to ask a question in a minute, and I don't know what it is. And if only I had a crib sheet. So I understand the need for that. But at the same time, developing that skill yourself is so important. It's so important to be able to pull yourself back instead of going, have you tried doing, and changing it to, tell me what you've already thought about trying.
It's hard, isn't it? I mean, I'm sat here, you can't see it, but I've got my pen and my pad in my hand. You go and you listen. And it's that thing, the first thing that you start with, the coaching contract, isn't it? In terms of, is it okay if I'm just going to sit and make some notes as we converse? That's the one thing we were taught to start with. And it's for that reason, isn't it? Because even though you're actively listening and engaging, your brain, that working memory isn't geared to hold on to all those things, is it? So, having that to refer back to and having those good questions, like, I'm guilty of it. Like when I go in and I work with my team in science or anyone else, I've watched and observed a lesson, I will scribble down questions. I will have prompts per se, just to remind me about the what and the how, because if you've not done it for a while, and that sometimes happens in schools, you do forget that forgetting curve. You do, and it's just having something there is a little bit of a help. I go, oh yeah, and it quickly comes back. But I kind of find those things really useful. So, what's your, just interesting then from that, what's your favorite question to ask?
Now you're putting me on the spot, Alex. What's my favorite question to ask? Again, I mean, I have to defer to stuff that I've learned from Peter, and I really can't overemphasize how much of an impact he's made on me. So it will be things like, particularly with female educators, and I don't want to generalize too much, but female educators tend to have confidence comes up a lot, mastery comes up a lot. So whether they feel confident and competent at something, and they will use phrases like imposter syndrome. And when they speak, a lot of the time they use diminishing phrases. I just wanted, I don't know, I'm not sure, I think that. And one of the lovely bits of gold that Pete passed on to me was, when someone finishes their sentence and says, did that make sense? After they've just said something that's very coherent, absolutely made sense, was really fine. For me to just reflect back and say, did it make sense to you?
Oh. Yeah, I thought you were going to drop in Pete's from what is my infamous line, the golden nugget. Golden nugget. Yeah.
Nugget. Trying to stay away from golden nuggets, actually.
But no, that's a really powerful question. Is it really? And that emphasizes for the listeners and people watching there about putting it back onto people for that self-discovery and why it should be so powerful. And I know we're talking about teachers, but for teachers, about that self-discovery and taking control and ownership of, I'd never really, and you see that at the top of the time, you go, I never really thought about it like that in terms of putting people on the spot, kind of like I just did to you, but really getting them to think, because sometimes people just come in, and from my experience, and they just want to be told, just want to know. Tell me, and that the emphasis that then highlights maybe you're not ready to be coached, as it were, or
the dependency on having that feedback, right? They need to have that feedback. And the another question I really like to ask is, particularly when I'm getting to know a person and we do kind of context setting, and they say to me, or I ask about their strengths, because we haven't mentioned that, but strengths, because I'm cut from that same cloth, that positive psychology cloth, I'm looking at people's strengths rather than their weaknesses. So I ask them to tell me what they're good at. And they'll start listing things off, and they'll say things like, I'm really good at building relationships, and, I think I'm a people person, whatever. And I just really like asking them, how do you know? Because it's not that I don't believe them. I do believe them, but I want them to be granular about, what does that mean? What does that actually mean? How do you build a relationship with somebody? Is it because you're deeply empathetic, or is it because you're positive, or is it because you're great at relating to other people? You can hear me listing off the Clifton strengths, but those things are really important for me to understand you better, and for you to understand you better. I want you to ask yourself, how do you know? How do you know? Rather than just a feeling, like, let's get clear on it. Because when you have that clarity, then you can use it, because then it's really powerful. All the while it's vague, it's always going to be vague. And then your direction from there on in is always going to be vague. So yeah, how do you know?
I love where you've gone with that about strengths, because more often than not, teachers are going about weaknesses. When people come and make observations, they talk about, this is what you could have done better. This wasn't so good. This is graded down. And one of the best things I took from that, and my sister actually gave me the Gallup Strengths book to go through, because she's a project manager and they did it back in the UK. But the best thing I took from the course, and I try and emphasize in mine, is about strengths being points, and how do you make your pointy bits pointier. And it sounds silly, I know, but it's very much a thing we overlook in education, is that we don't often see teachers' strengths for what they really are and go, well, how can we make this stronger? And then how can that have a positive impact on the other things that you do? So I really, really like with focus on those strengths. That's really a good takeaway from there.
I love the strengths thing, Alex. Sorry, just to jump in, and feel free to edit this all out if I'm prattling on for too long. I love the strengths thing, because for me, that was one of the most transformative things in terms of my own mindset, looking at that balconies and basements. And my top strength is that I'm an achiever. And I reckon when I looked across all of those characteristics, I recognized all of them, the balconies and the basements. And I could see, yes, I'm a go-getter. I work hard. I've got a strong work ethic, all of those things. And yes, I overcommit, and I can't say no, and I burn the candle at both ends. And, all of those things I can see. But now that I understand that they're connected, I used to just punish myself mercilessly for those basements. I used to wish I was somebody else. I didn't understand that if I cut that part of me off, it would be like cutting off a gangrenous part of my body, and I would be missing out on that great strength that I have, which is the person who's the achiever. And I try and encourage teachers to look at that and say, okay, there's light and shade to this strength that you have. We're not saying this is a weakness, this is an understanding. And it's also how you can create accountability for yourself and how you can articulate yourself better to other people. And the best example I can give of this is, let's imagine we're going for a job interview, of which we will at some point, and someone asks you that question, what's your weaknesses? Now I know what my answer is, and it's really strong. I say, one of my great strengths is that I'm an achiever, which means that I'm a real go-getter, and I work, and I'm tireless, and I've got a great work ethic. But I do have a tendency to overcommit, and it's something that I'm really looking to build accountability around. And that's a much better answer than just saying, I don't know, I don't know. People never really know how to answer that question. That's an answer to a question that shows self-awareness.
Yeah, that was exactly about what I was going to say. It shows more of the intrinsic looking in about yourself and your potential leadership qualities rather than the external, type of thing. And I've been in that situation where I've been asked those questions before, and I actually really struggled. And almost I was told I was too honest, because one of the things I've struggled with is empathy. And I said, I struggle to show empathy for others, but it's something that I am working on, and it's a learned ability to do, and I'm working hard on that. And the feedback I got was like, I don't know if that was a good thing to be that honest about. And it's like, really? But that's what you would have got from me. And it's hard sometimes, isn't it, to know how to pitch it and what to say. And I suppose, like you said, yours is well rehearsed, it's well practiced, isn't it? It's, we can go for interviews, and it's good to have those things in the locker to draw upon, because we know at some point we're going to get asked those questions. So what would you say then, of all these different facets that we've talked about today, what do you find the most rewarding about your work as a coach?
It's the impact that I have on individuals. I think it's while of course, the ultimate goal is that we're making some kind of culture shift within a school. That really is down. I'm not there on the ground in every school all the time, being able to kind of orchestrate that, and neither should I be. That should come from within. The bit that I can impact the most directly is the work that I do with people, one-to-one or kind of team coaching. I love those moments where I do the coach training as well, where people are like, oh, I really thought I was listening, or I really thought I was giving good advice, or I suddenly realize what I've been doing all this time. And it's just that kind of light bulb moment. I love that light bulb moment for them, because they're like, oh wow, I've just got to go and got to make a few calls, like got to go apologize to a few people. But the one-to-one stuff is really powerful for me, because it allows people to suddenly, first of all, it might be the first time they've had the opportunity to discuss themselves professionally with somebody where there is no consequence to that conversation for the whole of their teaching career. And so the opportunity to have that, where it doesn't matter what you say to me, I'm just here to listen, to learn, to help you maximize your potential, to uncover your strengths, whatever it is. So I love that kind of uncovering and learning about somebody. But I also really like seeing the transformation. If I work with someone for a while, and some of the people who I work with at their school have then come separately and self-funded to have one-to-one coaching sessions, which I'm always blown away by, because I think, my goodness, if you're investing in this yourself, it means that you really believe that this is going to be beneficial. Seeing the transformation when I work with someone for a long time is really kind of heartening and heartwarming, particularly when they develop themselves professionally and it leads to them having a new opportunity. I'm not necessarily saying promotion, but let's say promotion, a new job, but they know themselves better. It's the confidence that comes from self-awareness raising that I really love. That's the sweet spot.
That word, the sweet spot. I love it. Absolutely love it. So to finish with, what is your vision? What are your hopes for the educational coach for the future?
Oh, let's not finish, Alex. Let's just talk forever. What are my hopes for the educational coach? Obviously growth. The more schools we work with, the more conversations we impact. So growth is always there. Diversification a little bit, because as our work with schools develops, I see this evolution happening. I can see what happens on the ground, and then I can see what else we could add in terms of impact that we could have. So what I'm starting to see is that it starts with coaching for us, and then it develops into other things. And really, that culture piece is something that I'm really interested in looking at a little bit more. So thinking intentionally with schools about culture is an identity is something that I'm really interested in. And I spoke at BSME about identity, and that was to do with global identity. So it's that thing. So coaching, culture, and also the impact with students, which we haven't touched on, but it's all part of the whole thing. It's, as you say, the trickle down effect is really being able to see that those students are having the benefit of teachers who have these skills. Because when we look at what are the 21st century skills that we need, this being human, knowing how to be a human, that's the bit that's unique to us, right? And being able to construct those great questions and developing those relationships and like increasing effective communication, that's the whole bit. That's everything. So that's it. Those are the plans. That's the business plan.
That's a wonderful answer. It sounds like you were gearing yourself up to invite yourself back on for another episode then, to sort of we've not touched upon that yet, another episode. I'll be back on. No, that's wonderful. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. And it's something that's close to my heart in terms of the importance and the emphasis, and to see someone who's, thoroughly taken it on, not just in the UK, but internationally, and it's just fantastic. So thank you for coming on today and sharing that with us and insights. Now is your opportunity for a shameless plug, by the way. So if people want to reach out, get in contact, where can they find you? How do they get in contact with you?
So you can go to our website, which is theeducationalcoach.co.uk. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Julie Keyes, Keyes. So I'm forever spelling out my surname. Please follow me on there. I love to connect with people on there, educators from all around the world. I learn so much from people on LinkedIn. And Instagram, at The Educational Coach. I'm very engaging, very humorous. Please do follow me. I'm joking.
I would have said you are humorous. I learned that your child left his lunch at home the other day. I mean,
he did. It's a bit of realness, the LinkedIn bit is the professional Julie, and the educational coach Instagram is a little bit more dancing around my kitchen kind of stuff.
It humanizes you, as you say. There we go. Well, that's amazing. Thank you ever so much again for coming on and sharing all that with us and the listeners and people watching. And we wish you all the best for the future. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the International Classroom Podcast. I hope that our discussion has provided you with some valuable insights and perspectives on education from around the world. If you've enjoyed this episode, subscribe on your favorite streaming platform to stay up to date on our latest episodes. If you've got any feedback or any comments or suggestions for future topics, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on our website or on our social media channels. Remember guys, education is a lifelong journey and we're excited to continue exploring the world of education with you. So don't forget to subscribe and we will see you in the next episode of the International Classroom.